to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is why I disagree with everyone, including even myself. Now, unfortunately, here in South Africa, we had a couple of blackouts this weekend. I couldn't finish the video that I would have liked to do. So assume that I made this video on Saturday. Now, I will make a statement in Afrikaans. And it goes like this. Ek is goed die moer in. Which is a nice translation in English is, I am very angry. And then I'll add a part, and disappointed. Now, I've been following various guys for the last couple of months. Actually, some of them even years. And there's a long list, but I won't mention all of them. I'll disagree with Michael Kofman, Alexander Mercouris, Christoforou, Gonzales Lira, and then even Larry Johnson and Andrei Martyanov. And then the guy who's ever behind the military summary. And then actually myself. But there are many more. And as you would have guessed probably, because I'm dating and trying to backdate it to Saturday, it's a withdrawal of the Russian forces from Liman. Now, we all talked about when the Ukrainian forces started their so-called counter-offensive, which is basically nothing more than an offense of operation. And we saw that they concentrated most of their attacks on the south front, in the Kherson area. And in that area, the Russians always stopped them. And the Ukrainian forces couldn't do much. But then the Ukrainian forces amassed some amount of troops in the northern area, in the Kharkiv region, and started an offense there. And then, if you remember correctly, in a couple of weeks back, they conquered Balakleya and Izium. Now, commentators that I've mentioned, and even myself, have looked at the situation, and like Andrei Martyanov said, it was a small operation. It was a small tactical advantage, not a strategic advantage. And he also went out about, you've got to look at the scale of the maps, and you will find that the conquering of those areas of Izium were small. Well, they were not that small. They were about 60, 70 kilometers. And the excuse was made that, and even myself, that there must have been a plan behind this. The Russian military command must have had a reason why they were doing it. We were told that the defense was very sparsely in those regions. And we all argued basically that the Russian military command should have had the necessary intel. I mean, they have satellites overhead, they have UIVs, a lot of them. They have informants on the ground, even in the western part of Ukraine. And even if you look at the daily reports by the Defense Department, they always knew where the targets were and how many people more or less they were concentrated in those areas. And based on that, they predicted the casualty rate of the Ukrainian forces. So we all assumed that their intelligence was excellent. And then we all made excuses because we couldn't believe that the Russian military command could make an error in that region. And then we argued and presented possibilities of that they will allow these Ukrainian troops to come out of their defensive positions and then come into the open, and then they would annihilate them. Now, then there were statements made by a lot of these commentators. I don't know where they got the information from, but apparently the Ukrainian forces suffered heavy losses during these attacks, and that they lost a lot of hardware and manpower. Now, the department of the briefings from the Defense Department didn't show any huge losses during the offensive. They only mentioned basically the targets, the results of targeted strikes in various locations, and most of them are usually in the south at the Kherson area. So I was wondering, where does this information come that the Ukrainians were losing a lot of manpower? Because I couldn't find anything about that, except for statements, which is not really followed by any credible information sources. And then the Ukrainians continue with the offensive, and they have now retaken a huge swath of area. So the statement by Andrei, that's no more. It's not a little operation. It's not a small area that's been taken. A huge area has been taken in the north of the Kharkiv region. But in any case, so even the military summary channel, I looked at it, the last video we made on Friday, and he even stated that the Russians will not leave Liman. They will fight to the, he will stated actually he will fight to the last Russian. And, well, I didn't really agree because I don't have the necessary knowledge about that. But in any case, I was supporting him and then said, okay, that is what's going to happen. The Russians they're going to make a stand there, and then they're going to defend the area. And then on Saturday morning, I read now, the Russians have withdrawn out of Liman and into other defensive positions. And that's where everything sort of started. Now, what I would like to do is to quote the leader of the Chechens, which is Ramzan Kadyrov. He made a statement on the retreat from Krasny Liman, and some of it will be paraphrased, some of it will be direct quotes. In any case, he said, and remember, this man carries a lot of respect, and he cares for his troops, his soldiers. And as a military leader, you cannot fault him. Yes, he might have spoken out of turn, but, I mean, come on. But the soldiers die, not the generals. The generals sit in the back and then control the fighting on the front. But it's the troops and the commanders that do the fighting and the dying. So let me read here. I have always said, there's nothing better than the truth, however bitter and hurtful it might be, but the truth. According to Kadyrov, Colonel General Alexander Lapin was in charge of the defense of this area. He apparently deployed mobilized fighters from the LPR and other units at all the Liman directions, but did not provide them with the necessary communications, interactions, and ammunition supplies. 2 weeks ago, Kadyrov was informed by Major General Abdi Alaudinov, commander of the Akhmat Special Forces, that his men would become easy targets. Kadyrov then informed General Valery Gerasimov, the head of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, of the dangers that these men might be put in. And then as General Valery Gerasimov indicated that he has faith in Lapin's military talent, and he did not think that the retreat in the Krasny Liman area and its environments was possible or necessary. Apparently, Lapin moved his headquarters to Starobelsk, Belts, 100 kilometers away from his subordinates, while he himself sat in Lugansk, 150 kilometers from the front. Because of the absence of elementary military logistics today, Russia had to abandon several settlements and a large area of the territory. Then Karlov said, army nepotism doesn't do any good. The army must appoint commanders who are tough, courageous, and principled, who care about their men, who fight for their soldiers, and know that their subordinates must not be left without help and support. There is no place for nepotism in the army, especially in difficult times. Even back then I said, in the case of Elysium, fire at the enemy's military accumulation in Elysium, captured by the fascists, especially since our artillery had such an opportunity at that time. At once, we would have finished off the main Satanists and fascists. And then, in response, the head of the Wagner group said, Komarov's expressive statement, of course, is not my style at all. But I can say, Ramzan, tough boy, burn. All these bastards should go to the front barefoot and with rifles. Now, these were the expressions of some of the military personnel that are involved in the operation. They should know what is going happening. But then, Dmitry Babich, who is a regular commentator on Crosstalk, and in a recent interview, well, not the interview, but the recent program, he stated the following. He stated that he had friends and relatives in Ukraine, and they all said the same thing. We do not want the front line to move. If Russia can assure us that we are safe and make us part of Russia, please do not go away. Do not let the Ukrainian troops come back. If you allow the Ukrainian troops to come back, then you are to blame for something terrible. Then you should not have started this, because you have made us suffer. Either do it to the end, or do not even start it. Now, in our initial reaction to the Elysium disaster, which I now call a disaster, and a failure of the military command, there were a lot of, the Ukrainians came in and they rounded up all the Russian collaborators. And they stated their aim that these guys will, well, that they will punish these. And there were reports that some of these people were actually executed. Some of them were tortured. And some of them will be locked up. And then a number of these commentators stated that the PR version of this is not good, and thereby actually agree. Because if the Russians conquer a certain area and then they prevent all these benefits of Russia, and then the people who support them, and then the Russians withdraw, then those people are going to be targeted. So that creates an uncertainty in areas that still need to be conquered or have been conquered by the Russian forces, especially in the northern areas where those areas are not part of the Lugansk Oblast or Republic. Now it also has, they discussed that the Russian population itself were angry with these withdrawals. And initially I thought, okay, these guys are more than liberal people and so on. And one can understand they might have been influenced by the propaganda of the West. But then I thought when Babich actually said that he had family there, then I realized that most of the Russians that are upset on social media about the withdrawal are not only upset because of the withdrawal itself, but because they had families there, and relatives, and friends. And they feared for these guys' lives because of the retribution that the Ukrainian army and command has basically stated. So it's not only a PR campaign, which the Russians are losing 10-0. You've got to look at the psychological behavior or conditions of your population as well, and whether you can maintain that support. So my argument is, soldiers are there to protect civilians. That is their function. And together with that, there is a military offensive and the fighting that goes with it. But the priority should always be to protect the innocent civilians. Civilians that cannot defend themselves. So from a point of withdrawing from ECM was already a very grey area, but I gave the Russian command the benefit of the doubt. Now, with the second withdrawal out of Liman, there is no more doubt in my mind. Somebody in the general command stuffed up. It's not a matter of priority. It's a matter of stuffing up. So, Andrei said that the area is small, but here we have a map that shows you the total area that has recently been conquered by the Ukrainian military forces in the north. That's no small area. And just remember that if you want to retake, when the Russian forces want to retake that area, they again have to approach the defensive positions and have unnecessary manpower losses. If I was a soldier in that area and I lost a body or was injured and I lost a body that was killed in the first offensive, and now I have to retreat, and then my body died for nothing, I wouldn't feel very happy. But in any case, here's the current status of the battlefront. And you can see the areas that have now been, which is still occupied by Russian forces. And then you will see the areas that have been recently conquered by Ukrainian forces. And that doesn't look too good, I'm sorry to say. I can understand the Russian forces wanted to concentrate on the Kherson defense, because there's where the bulk of the Ukrainian forces were concentrated. And I can understand that military or the amount of Russian forces were always, well, they were enough at the beginning, but matters have progressed, and now there are not enough Russian forces anymore to do the SMO. And then that's why we have a 300,000 rand call-up of reserves. But in my opinion, it's a little bit too late. Those call-ups should have happened at least a month or 2 months back. When the intelligence have come in that the Ukrainians will do a counter-offensive in August or September, then that would have been clear. Zelensky is now stating that he has more than 700,000 troops. Now, according to regional information, Ukrainians were about 200,000 troops, and the Russians were about 200 troops. Well, we can debate about the numbers, but the point here is that, let's call it more like that, because everybody uses different numbers, and what is the correct answer and what is not. But that is what's stated by the Russian military. 200,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and combined with the LPR, the Russian force was 200. That's more or less right. But now the situation has changed. Now we have 700,000 troops on the one side, and we still have the 200,000 troops on the one side. Then it becomes ridiculous. So as soon as that information, because the Russians would have had the informants in the western area, like I stated, they would have known about the whole matter. So why didn't they react? Why wasn't the reserves called up a month or 2 months ago? Were there political reasons for that? Surely they could have made some other plans, that they could have made it more clandestine, you know? Silently call up more people, gradually, then move of the professional forces to the west that are currently protecting other regions of Russia. Come on, there would have been some solutions. Anyway, guys, as I've stated, I've been following the military summary website, channel. And what I actually found most of the time, it was a little bit too detailed and actually too lack of details, actually both of them. Nobody knows really where the Russian forces are. Nobody really knows where the Ukrainian forces are. So what he discussed is, he only discussed what was the possible, where the attacks were, and what was the possible strategies that the Russians and Ukrainians can follow. It was sort of like a micromanagement of the battlefield without having proper information, which is fine. I don't really mind about it. But in any case, so what we're going to do is we're going to first have a look at the southern part, the Kherson area. And as you can see, huge part is still Russian controlled, and then the blue area basically is where the Ukrainians are, and they are fighting on a battleground. And most of both armies' forces are concentrated at the area. Now, I can understand the Russian objective to strengthen that border, because Kherson and Zaporizhzhia are important oblasts. Those were not conquered just for the sake of conquering. During these last 8 years, Crimea suffered water shortages because the Ukrainians cut it off from the water supply. And also the power supply was cut off to Crimea. And Zaporizhzhia is the main power, the biggest power station in that area. And there's also huge rivers and dams and that thing that supplies the Crimean area. So from a strategic point, those two areas were very important for Russia, and it also formed a land bridge to Donetsk. And basically, then this whole area becomes part of that. And since they always planned to make them part of Russia because they knew the people will vote for it, it's 100% common sense that you will protect that area at any cost. But the problem is you cannot weaken your other sections of the front. And now we have a look at Donetsk area. And as you can see, the Donetsk area is actually very narrow. And for the last 8 months, the Donetsk city was still targeted and shelled by the Ukrainians. And I can never understand why the Russians ever allowed that. Just don't understand that. They have the tools to prevent it. Why did they never use it? And again, I blame the military command. You could have sent the necessary artillery and long-distance missile systems in that area. You could have focused your satellite imaging on that. You could have done a lot of UAV reconnaissance on that. And you should have targeted and identified the location of those artillery systems of Ukraine that were shelling the Donetsk long time ago and taken them out. And if you didn't want to do it, then you should have progressed and increased the distance between the artillery of Ukraine and Donetsk city, which the Russians also didn't do. So again, civilian people died unnecessarily. And again, the general command is blamed for that. Make no mistake for that. I don't blame Putin. I blame the general command. And then with the whole concentration of the expectation of the southern part, you can look at the northern part, and you will find that a nice blue area that has now been reoccupied by the Ukrainians. You still see that they are outside the Lugansk Republic's borders. So I believe the Russians will defend that border in any case, but they should have defended it a long time ago. if they don't stop the advance of the small group, relative small group, I understand there's about 40,000 Ukrainian troops in that area, of which 9,000 or 12,000 did the attack on Liman. Then this small group is actually very effective. And the reason why they are so effective is that there is effectively no protection of the front by the Russians. And if you don't stop them, then they will reoccupy Lugansk. And what's the point then? And it doesn't seem to me that the Russians are making any plans. Or maybe they are thinking that the progress of the Ukrainian army will be so slow that by the time they reach the border of Lugansk, the Russians will have their 300 reservists online and at the front. I don't think so. These guys are moving now. Apparently, Liman has a big railway system. And there's a strategic point for so the Ukrainians can be supplied. And for some other reason, the military, the Russian military never destroyed any. I'm not talking about infrastructure. Don't go blow up a dam and go blow up a power station. But flip and destroy the railway system. It can always be repaired, yes, even by the Russians. So if you need it later, you can repair it. But at least destroy it so that you destroy the supply lines of Ukraine. But no, the Russians didn't do that either. Why? Why? Come on, I'm an armchair general. And if I can see it and other people can see it, then why doesn't the Russian command see it? In any case. So now we have the northern area. And now we come to the critical area. Liman. Again, the orange part is where it is supposed to be the areas occupied by the Russians. And in the blue area, which is controlled by Ukrainian. And then you have all the other openings. And if you listen to reports and so on, all the other times, then it's all about encircling Liman. Ooh, the Russians must be withdrawn from Liman because they're going to be encircled by the Ukrainian forces from the north, the west, and the south. Now look a little bit at the situation. It has already been disconnected. The Liman area has already been disconnected from the large part of the orange part. And if you look at southeast of Liman, you see, hey, it's not that far away. You know, we can look at the scale and let's say 3 centimeters is 10 kilometers. So it's not that far away. You know, and you can actually, so the guys are actually arguing that the strategy would be to encircle Liman, but if you look at it, the Russians can attack from the north, and the Russians can attack from the south, and then these valuable encircling Ukrainian troops can be shot from the front and from the rear. So this is a very dangerous or unlogical pincer movement. I mean, come on. Unless you really know that there are really no Russians in that area. Now again, I have a few men going to the command. So if I now was the general, the Russian general, what would I have done about the whole matter? Well, firstly, you are setting up defensive positions. And just remember, I am an armchair. But if I knew, and I must have had the intelligence, because they didn't have the intelligence, then there's something seriously wrong with the Russians. Seriously wrong. You see amassment of troops. You can see that. You can even see where they moved, because they leave tracks behind, which can be seen by UAVs. and if there's high resolution satellites in front of it, in place. And if you didn't have that facility, then, you know, in South Africa, we had the Rekkies. Those were our specialist forces. A translation, that would be the reconnaissance platoon or battalion. Now, these guys will go sometimes alone out, or two or three guys alone, and then they will go and do reconnaissance. And these guys are flipping some of the best and hardest guys that I ever seen. So, you know, then send some of your special forces there that do the reconnaissance. If you don't, and say from Liman, you put them 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers away, which is not that far a distance, and then they observe the traffic on the road, because according to military summary, the Ukrainians were moving at night. So if you want to see, but sound is also travels far in the night, and yeah, you're going to move 4,000-5,000 men, 9,000 men. That's not going to be very quiet. You're going to move tanks and APCs and so on. It's not going to be quiet. But in any case, you put out your reconnaissance troops, 1 or 2 guys, clearly flippant disguise and so on. And then they give you the early warning systems. And they can give you the coordinates of the strike. And you will, well, if they reach that point, then you let go with the artillery. And if you don't have enough artillery, then you bring in your aviation. But at least you've got the coordinates, and you can stop the attack before they even reach a limit. And then also, if you don't want to really do that, then you put your artillery far back enough, just in the range of Liman, or in the front of Liman. And as the defense in the Liman region observes the attack, then they call in the strike, and then the aviation or the artillery targets those that attack operation while they are in the attack. And then they run into the artillery. But nothing has happened like that. And even if you look at the statement that Kadyrov has said, that he asked at Izium, why didn't the artillery destroy them? So it seems to me that the Russians didn't react. And we were all wrong. All of us. Why didn't the generals do what they had to be doing it? You can ask you the question, what was the reason for the special military operation? Yes, to demilitarize, demilitarize. That means you kill the army. But if you don't want to kill the army, then you have to capture them. And the only way you can capture them is by destroying their supply lines, and then it's like a siege, but not a siege that you surround them. It's a siege where you cut off their supplies, and then they have nothing, and they have to give over. So even that one doesn't gel really with the objective and the decision by the military command. But in any case, just for instance, I forgot actually to say, the response of the military command to Kadyrov's statement that Le Pen was supposed to do the defense of that region, then the command said no, but Le Pen was not responsible for that area, and he only had limited force to do for the reserves. Now, if that was the case, then the military command is lying, because initially when Kadyrov questioned the general, he stated clearly that he has faith in Le Pen and his defense and his strategy. And now it is contradictory. So somebody is lying. Seriously. So in any case, this is now the story about the Liman offensive and the retreat of Russian troops. What now? All I can say is we are very brave, sitting behind our desks and our computers, making these statements. Nobody of us really has an idea what's going on. Nobody. Does anybody of you know where the troops are, where the Russian forces are? Does anybody here know what weapons are in that area? Does anybody of you know what Ukrainian troops are there and what is their military capability? None of you know that. Does anybody know what the objective is of the Russian forces? No, nobody. But let's go a little bit into detail, and that is why I actually say I'm also wrong. So what I would like to do is show you the terrain of Liman. Now look carefully. I try to zoom in. The maps are not clear enough that I can identify what everything goes on there. There's some funny structures in front of Liman. And I'm not even sure there's a hill in front of Liman, but we do recognize there are some forests and so on. And we know that forests people can hide in, and they are protected from UIVs. And the forests make it difficult to counter any attack. And Liman on the attack side, especially on the north, western side, and on the southern side, there are forests up till the city limit or town limit or whatever. And then the rest of it is all open spaces. Now, again, sorry, but you know, the Russians have infrared sensors on their UIV. They should have seen these masses, this attack coming. They should have seen everything in detail. Like I said, if they didn't see it, then there's some seriously problems for the Russian army. In any case, so now I'm saying again, we armchair guys know nothing. And it's better, the sooner you realize that, the better you will see the bigger picture. Now, I don't know where you are living, or you're living in a city, or you're living in a rural area, or whatever. But I'm telling you, go out. If you live in a city, go out, look at the window, and imagine that your town or your city is being attacked. This is now wartime. How would you defend and how would you fight in a urban area? Go take your car, go drive out to the rural area, any area, and assume there where you are standing, that is what area you have to defend. How are you going to set up your military? How are you going to set up your artillery? Where are you going to put all your soldiers? Where is the attack going to come from? How are they going to attack? How are you going to see them? How are you going to fire them? And you will notice this is not an easy thing. It's complicated. If you were in the army, most of the time like I was, then I would have been in infantry and I would have had a rifle. I did fire some mortars, not a problem. Did fire an LMG, no problem. So I did all this, threw a grenade, no problem. But did I ever use an anti-tank gun? No. Did I ever drive in an APC or commanded an APC? No. Did I ever drive a tank? Definitely not. I was once in a tank, but that's a long time ago. Did I ever fly a fighter aircraft or any other? No. I actually flew some simulators aircraft, Second World War. And then you had to go and bomb the flipping target, but you cannot see even out of your cockpit. So I realized that was already difficult. That was just a simulation PC game. So until you have done that, you don't really know what is operational. You don't fly a fighter jet and you fly over a certain area and you know there's anti-aircraft systems. And then you see the plume or you get a warning system or you don't even know that the Stinger is being released and there you fly. and this thing is chasing you. Nobody of you have done that. You don't know, like in our war when we fought in Angola. Yes, we had fighter aircrafts and bomber aircrafts, but Cubans had anti-aircraft, Russian anti-aircraft system, and we were too afraid to lose our aircrafts, so we didn't fly with these. So we, when the battle would start and they were anti-aircraft, then you wouldn't get air support. That's it. So when a general makes a decision on the battlefield of sending aviation support, then you got to understand the whole complex, and none of us really understand that. I saw one video actually where there was an American mercenary, I believe. He probably had a Go camera on his head. He and his buddy was sitting behind a wall in the middle of nowhere. In front of him there was a wood, and they were being shot at. And he calls his buddy and said, come on, we're going to move. And then he found out his buddy was dead. Then he runs out down the fence, which is like a concrete fence or something like that. And then you hear he's being shot at. Then he turns around, fires in the middle of general directions, doesn't know really what's going on. And then poof. And then he falls down. You can see the camera goes and lies on the floor, like when his head goes on the floor. He's dead. Didn't know where the enemy was. Pulled some shots in the middle of nowhere. Haven't had a clue. Now, and also in the army, we had to go, in one part of our training, we had to go to sort of walk down a certain path in the wood. And then our commanders would put some targets, not targets, but say the enemy at certain locations. Now, let me explain it to you. I walked down that, so we all walked down that, and we all have died in the first couple of meters. Because it's very, very difficult to see an enemy. This is not a movie. This is not Hollywood. You walk down that aisle, before you see the enemy, you're dead. And you're not going to be revived like in a PC game. You're dead. Dead. Have you ever imagined yourself being in a tank and you're looking at the screen, because I believe they have computer screens there. You're looking at a target, the whole flippant thing is up and down. You're going to try to focus what's going on. You see the 4 or 5 kilometers, there's another tank starting to aim at you. You barely can see the target. And then try to fire on it. So now imagine, go outside. When you look at military exercise, and we also done that here in South Africa. Now there's an open space, and you see the guys running there, you see the tanks moving in a line, you see the APCs following, you see the men following, all open spaces like the Second World War. There are guys in trenches, and here we have a battle, tank battle, and here we approach and frontal assault and boof, and the European and NATO doing all the same. You see the rows of tanks charging over an open field and then attacking the enemy. That was tactic for Second World War. This is not the tactic anymore. There are trenches. But where are the trenches? It's not like you have a trench and I have a trench like in the First World War, and then we fight each other with the trenches, and then we bring in some tank or other. Any case. The enemy is situated in certain bushes or forests. Then they have to move over an open area. How are you going to do that? You want to, like I said, go to a rural area, go look at the terrain, and decide how you're going to defend it and how you're going to attack it. Moving over open space. Going down a line of trees. Are you going to follow the road? When you follow the road, you're going to be targeted. And then you imagine yourself, you are a soldier, an infanterist, sitting here. You see the enemy coming. You see that tank coming. Still 4 kilometers away or 5 kilometers away, but he's coming. Imagine yourself doing that. And then you realize, but you are an idiot. You don't know what you're doing. You have no knowledge of really what's going on. So until you go to the battlefront, we armchair generals can talk and talk and talk and talk, and we actually know nothing. But what I do know is, in my eyes, the Russian command has failed. It has failed in its objective. It has failed in protecting the civilians. They made effectively promises to those people in those occupied areas. Whether it was direct made or indirectly made, it was made. And they let those people in his steek. Down. They left them down. Now, I'm still supporting, well, you have to support them because you cannot support the lies in the West. I'm sorry. But I am demurring and I'm disappointed. And people should be fired. Any case, that's my story for today. If you like what you heard, press the like and dislike button as you choose. And please subscribe to the channel. Come on, there's a little bit more subscribers here. And until next time, cheers.